Hitting live.
Hitting live.
It says we are live, so I'm assuming we're live on the Change Physician podcast and community here on Facebook. I am Melissa Katie, and my co-host who just talked is Dr. Kevin Cuccaro.
That's right.
And what'd you say?
So that's right. That's what I'm talking.
That's right. Get it straight. I'm cross-posting this to the Challenge Doctor. If you're seeing me on Challenge Doctor, this is actually coming live to you from the Change Physician. And feel free, if you are a physician or a physician ally, feel free to reach out the changephysician.com, and you can sign up to be part of the community and know about all the things that we're doing to inspire change and give people the inspiration, skills, mindset, strategies, stories that can help us lead a better and more fulfilling life. So thanks for joining us today on the last day of 2020. So being that it is the last day of the year, I think, we might want to talk a little bit about what we learned about this past year of interviews. So we started, July, I think.
July.
So.
In just a second, I cross-post this all over the place as well, but I include my friends because I figure, hey, you guys should see what we're doing as well.
Yeah, good. So you were able to cross-post from your side?
No, I just go to the Change Physician website and then I just share it all to everything, every known person out there.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can. It only takes about 3 clicks, and you can share it to your professional pages. So, yeah, you share your professional pages, and then you also have a little quick button that you can share it directly to your friends.
Very nice.
If they're interested, although I know sometimes my family is interested, and they're usually chiming in. So.
Well, what do you think? Where should we start as far as our, year in review, since technically it was like a half year for the year in review, because we just initiated this community and podcast in the July timeframe.
Yeah, but I think 6 months in 2020 is probably about 7 years in pandemic years, right?
This is like dog years.
Yeah. Pandemic years or maybe it's like a year per month. I'm not sure. So it might be actually a 7-year review, 6 or 7 month year since we started in June. I think when was our first video? We posted July 6th was the very first drop that we had. And then
we were working before then.
Huh?
We worked.
We've been working for almost a month before that. And then it was released on audio, I think September 1st was when we were targeting that. So that's a pretty big deal, 3 months and then hit everywhere and be all over the place and see what's going on.
Yeah. And we've had a total of 55 episodes, not to mention our other additional little random Friday faves from Facebook Lives that we shared into the podcast feed. So we've had quite a number of amazing interviews. Are there any in particular that are standing out as, I can't do this. We can't do this because they're all awesome. And I think what we should do is maybe talk about what are the general themes of really stuck out the most, especially for those listening, whether you're a physician or not, where the challenges or the reasons for people changing their life, what were like the biggest central core issues that you think were, maybe we learned a lot this year that certain issues are really prevalent in a lot of people.
Well, or themes, right?
Or maybe a theme.
I'm looking through it, and I think we've mentioned this in many of our recordings and probably a lot of Friday Faves as well. The one that always comes up is like awareness, like just being aware that, and awareness is all sorts of stuff, but it to me it means that it's like you're kind of going through your life, and if you're in this ocean and everything's in the ocean, you're sort of swimming, you can't see anything. And awareness is when you pop your head up and you can look around, take a big breath, and actually see the big picture. And I think that really shone through in a lot of different ways. People recognize when there were problems with the system. They were either or sometimes early on, they recognized that there was problems with their choice in medical school, and being aware enough to recognize that, yes, there is a problem. And then the next step being is, what can I do about it? So then looking around and saying, okay, well, this is the situation. This is the best information that I have. What am I going to do next? And that, again, is just absolutely crucial, because without that level of awareness, if you don't have that level of awareness, you can't actually institute intentional change. Things can change, but then it tends to be much more reactive. We're following up maybe maybe there's a job struggle, maybe you leave under bad terms, maybe whatever. There's a reaction, and that reaction can generate change, but it's not necessarily intentional change. And so I think that's really important for people to realize, is you move some way, choose something else, but you're not actually addressing those core issues intentionally, and you can only do that through awareness. Then you're changing through chance rather than intention. I think that again, I think that has come up over and over and over again in our episodes.
And the question is, sometimes it's hard for people to be aware if they can't see it, so to speak. And I'm not talking about the virus during a pandemic. I'm talking about, like, how do people, it's just for us to banter about, how do people become aware of something they're kind of oblivious to? Like, what is it that it takes for them to finally see that? Or do you think it's just one of those things that, they hit rock bottom, or something bad happens and then they recognize that things should be different? Or what do you think?
Well, I think that's common mythology, is that you have to hit rock bottom, and I definitely think that is an easy. I mean, that'll definitely get you some level of awareness, because you're hitting the bounce, right? Really hard bounce will make you start looking around. But I think if you just recognize that you're dissatisfied, and then that's always a tricky thing, because there has to be some sort of trigger, right? So if there's amount of dissatisfaction, the question really is do you want to change, or there needs to be change? And then looking around, like this, I think is like level one awareness, is just start looking around for something different. And if like this podcast is like a level one awareness switch. It's just saying, I don't know what's going on, I'm sort of flailing around. And then you're looking to see, what are people saying, what are people doing, are people doing things differently? And I think that once you start seeing other people, and you start seeing stories, and you start seeing those examples, then you can return that awareness back to yourself and say, hey, well, I see Dr. Katie doing it. She's doing something different. She didn't satisfy, she settled for this. She's pretty much like me. What can I do? And then they can start identifying a little bit more intentionally things that they want to change. But I do think, that's one of the strong advantages that we have now in this internet era, is in the past to try to find mentors or people that you can model. Because that's what really we're talking about, is modeling someone's behavior, modeling someone's pre-choices that they made, so that we don't necessarily are flailing around blindly in the room. And the internet era has allowed us to find those lights and to model them, or hear from them, or learn from them in such an easier way than, I mean, it's a completely different world than it was even 10 years ago, if you kind of really think about that. I mean, you just think about yourself when you were having those struggles, when you were completing fellowship, and you're like, something's wrong here, what am I going to do? Sure, we had YouTube and stuff, but we didn't have the volume that we had anymore. I mean, it is, when I went into my little tailspin, there were not any physician podcasts. Like, so I was, listening to business podcasts, listening to completely different audiences, which is also fantastic. I would highly recommend people look outside of medicine. But now, if you're even, well, what does this business guy have? What is it even relevant to me? Now there's a crap ton of physician podcasters, YouTubers, etc. Some better than others. Some, there's certainly people better than us. There's some people who probably don't do as useful stuff as we do. But there's a lot of examples, so you can figure out who you connect with, who seems to align with what your values are. And it's so much easier now, I think, than it was before.
Yeah. No, I think there's so much opportunity to explore, and understand maybe what resonates with you, what aligns with you, and who you are. That awareness, it makes me think of even, various types of, I think it's true. You don't have to hit rock bottom. It's sometimes, like, 20 years ago, like, another country may not have realized that, you know, women, women could have the right to, like, speak their mind. And, like, now, I mean, there's so many little things, and we're now one big, it's globally, we are just kind of united in this social media world. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation about various types of topics out there. But if you're getting just stories and opportunities, and understanding the opportunities out there because you're seeing other people doing it, and may have just been so, and I hate to say this because as physicians, we are brainwashed to a certain extent, but if you're brainwashed to think that you have to get up and work every day, 5 days a week and take call, and like, that's, to me, it's hogwash. Like, you you can leverage your position as a physician, or in any other value that you might have for this world. You can leverage it and create and design the life you want. And I think you have to have the awareness that there's something else that exists outside of the world that you live in, and the beliefs that you have that this is the only way to do things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of I think all of our guests, there was at some point an aha moment that either I don't like the way things are going and I want to change it and I will find a way, or they had a mentor, or they, um, you know, joined up forces with other people. What are you laughing at?
Or they were just like had that intention from the beginning. You know, I'm thinking like Eric Tate, you know.
Yes. Oh, he's a rarity though.
Holy crap, man. It's like he's just like, bam, this is what I wanted and this is what I'm gonna do. And he did, you know, he did it. And he just completely and designed. That's not me for sure. Like
He was very laser focused.
oh yeah, yeah.
At
It's
least
amazing.
the perception I have is that's what he had.
Well, and that is a, you know, that's someone you can model then, right? I guess the risk is, oh my gosh, you have somebody who's so laser focused, who went in with such intention, who really crafted this life pretty much pre-medical school.
Mm-hmm.
And you can either say, well, I can never do that, or you could say, well, what can I pull out of that and make it useful for me? Because the other part is that a lot of us that's not, at least we don't start that way. We're not so intentional. We may are doing something else. We may find other things that we're interested in. And those outside interests, though, it doesn't mean that laser focused behavior is not relevant to you, is you still can figure out what those kind of success secrets are and apply them. Other thing that you said, what I thought was really kind of interesting was this idea of being able to craft your life as a physician. You can have what you want. And I do think, though, we need to make sure or people need to have that self-awareness to say you have to be able to prioritize what is important to you. You know, like if you want to craft a life where you are not on call, you're going to have to make sure you understand, well, how does that, you know, what is important to you? What are the options that you have? What options could you create? And there's a good, you know, if you're stepping outside of the typical career path, then you're also going to recognize that there's going to be some sort of cost, at least in the beginning. One of those oftentimes being income, right? So, you know, think about new residents or new fellows coming out of practice. And I don't ghost in those forums anymore, but typically you see that, oh, this fellow wants, you know, so much money and they don't want to take call and blah, blah, blah. And then there's the millennials and all that other bogus stuff, because every generation always wants to think the next generation's lazy.
Yeah.
But really comes down to is you kind of gotta, it's that recognition of value. Yes, you're absolutely valuable. In the same token, you got to recognize that the world that we are in, there are costs and benefits to it. You can choose what you're going to invest or not. And again, Eric Tate being a great example of that, who went in intentionally out of practice, did a part-time practice, taking less income because of that, because it gave him time to develop those other income streams that ultimately would serve his goal. But he didn't come out of residency saying, oh, I want, you know, the most lucrative practice in the world and I want no call and I want nothing else. He's like, well, this is going to support my internal mission. And he did it. So, yeah, just to bring a level back to people out there that you can't, you know, not that pie in the sky thing of whatever that book, The Secret or whatever. All I have to do is dream it. And if I say it 5 times before I go to bed, it's just going to happen. And someone's going to give me a $500,000 practice and I'll have no call and I'll only work 1 day a week. No. That doesn't work like that. Sorry.
I mean, the intention and the vision should be there, but it's got to be, there's more work behind that too. So like you got to put an effort. You made me think of this thought that it's an interesting phenomenon for physicians to go and kind of create their own life or create their own practice or do things that are just not the norm or not your traditional physician type practice. You have to recognize that you end up stepping into this treadmill, so to speak, that you have to do what's expected of you. and you kind of have to live in that confine if you want to be a physician, but you have to go into it with this very like intentional approach to design and come up, with the ideas of what you'd like to do based on what you're being exposed to, what resonates with you, whatever the times, how they're changing, and how that works with what you want to do. Like all these things, you have to be intentional on paint it. You have to really recognize what you want and don't want and have boundaries. And I think, I wish I had that kind of laser focus initially, but I think if you are going to have an entrepreneurial mindset and don't want the rigidity of this traditional physician life, you have to recognize that you are going to be conforming for a while to whatever's expected of you. And you have to kind of get out of that conforming mindset to create the life you want. And sometimes it comes with criticism or not being well understood by those around you because they don't get you. And I totally get that because I understand people don't always get my entrepreneurial approach, but a lot of it has to be with being inquisitive, being curious, wanting to be creative, wanting to have my autonomy, and wanting to help people in a way that maybe is not being delivered out there. So do I get it right all the time? Not necessarily. It's a process and evolution, but I think it's a really important point that a lot of people, almost all the people that we've interviewed, they go into this medical profession. They're and some brainwashing is with good stuff, but I'm saying there is some brainwashing and conforming. And so they have a recognition at some point that they need to think differently, or they just have always thought differently, like Dr. Eric Tate. So, but it's fascinating when you look at all of our guests, and I'm looking, I mean, everyone from, you know, Dr. Josh Umberg with talking about creating his own perfect practice, and Dr. Vicky Chan, who does direct sales, but yet is doing so much on like, TikTok and really nailing on how to like deliver education that way too, along with like Dr. Austin Chang, who's like a social media guru, we'll call him that. And, just even designing your own products you think are better for your patients, like the Dr. Anna Kabeka, building teams to help people with their health, like health coaching, Dr. Heather Hammerstedt. I mean, the list goes on people that are trying to design or create something different, not only for their patients, but maybe for their own lives too. And it just is a mutually beneficial thing. So anyway, I was going on for a while there, Kevin, but I think all of our guests fit that, they've been conformed and then they're trying to just do something different.
Well, in different levels of conformity or chaos, right? We definitely have people who were more focused on sort of creating the business, and then we have other people that were focused on creating their lives, like the Taylors, like Sarah and Colin Taylor, who are physicians up in Canada, which, again, I think that also came through in a couple of episodes, is the grass is not necessarily greener in different countries. There's still similar complaints. But how then they intentionally chose their practice environment and their living environment to facilitate their family dynamic. And again, I mean, it's just they had to have some awareness. They actually had to make and take those steps, and it's pretty cool stuff. I mean, but and I think the ultimate thing is that can be difficult to do. We should get a resident on at some point. I didn't even think about that, because it's a different era, right? So when we were in residency, let's see, when did Google come out? I'm trying to think when I got my Google account. I was either a medical student or I was a CA1. I think I was a medical student, actually, because I can remember I was on my MFM, maternal fetal medicine rotation, and it was the attending who told me about Gmail. He's like talking about Google or something. I was like, ooh, what's this weird thing? But it would be kind of interesting to see, because, when you're in residency, that's when we can use the term brainwashing, or we can say the drowning begins, right? Because you're just in that water, and you just somehow get through it, but you can't. It's so busy, you just can't put your head up. Or if I shouldn't say that. It's much more difficult to put your head up. But I'd be curious now, and maybe we should get Taylor back, because he he was a resident. He's doing podcasting, so I'm super curious now that what is it like in residency? Because then you look at a lot of these people on whatever TikTok and stuff. A lot of them are residents who are streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
maybe I guess they must know all this stuff. We're just getting old, I guess. We're late to the game.
I would say we're old. We're a little bit more mature on our understanding, or a little wiser, I should say.
Well, so how does social media impacting perspectives on physicians in training?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna have to write this down.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Media on physicians in training. Yeah. I wanted, before I forget this thought, you're bringing up Dr. Taylor Brana, and I just wanted to give shout outs to like a lot of physicians that are creating their own podcasts. So we have Dr. Taylor Brana, we have Dr. David Draginas, and you can check on our episodes and find where they're at and all their podcast names. Dr. Brent Lacey, let's see, David Draginas is Doctors Unbound, Brent Lacey, Scope of Practice. The Happy Physician was Dr. Taylor Brana. I'm trying to go by memory here. We also had, I think Dr. Ayman Jahangir actually had it. It was a blog. I don't know if it was a podcast.
He had a blog and then he sold it. It was a financial blog and then he sold it.
Right. And then we also have Dr. Mike Wu Ming, Bootstrap MD. He's got his own podcast. You need to check him out as well. Just talk about people who have a background and passion for things outside of medicine. He's got incredible wealth of knowledge there.
he was fun. Yeah, when I was he had both of us on his podcast recently, and I called him the Godfather because he really started like in the late 90s. It was when he first started his product development and really moved into that entrepreneurial space. So you didn't hear a lot of in internet physicians back then, and he certainly did it. I mean, we had a good time. We're talking about like direct response marketing and some of the people that he's hung around with. It's pretty cool. Like most physicians would know who they were, but these are pretty big name marketers.
Yeah, fun. Most definitely. Yeah, we also had Dr. Eric Larson with the Paradox podcast, and interestingly, because of a devastating event in their lives, his wife, it ended up spawning after losing their son. Just another Always Andy's Mom, the podcast for reaching out to all kinds of people going through and talking about grief, and really been an amazing asset to a lot of people out there. And let's see, some of our other, Dr. Erin Weissman, she has a podcast. We also had a UK physician, Dr. Ali Abdal, who has a massive YouTube station. Talk about someone who's built over 1 million followers. Interesting story, still in the midst of his training. So that would be actually, speaking of your interest in the impact of social media on physicians, that would be another person that we could talk to.
Yeah, although I think I'll be curious because he finished that whole UK thing with the junior doctor versus whatever the next step, and kind of it sounds like the junior doctors are more like residents or whatever. Like intern. Yeah, I'll be curious because he's taken that year off, and we talked about that I think on our Friday Faves. How in the UK it's real common that people finish the junior doctor training and they'll take like a year off. Mm-hmm. Go figure.
Yeah. And he's making money through YouTube, so
I'd be curious if he goes back. I mean, he's got. I think we reached out. He was like 800,000 subscribers, and he's over 1.2 million now. Yeah, like
he's doing a lot of things right there.
It's insane. Yeah, but he also started earlier. That's the other thing is that was the secret of what they say. I was an overnight success after 15 years or whatever, because nobody sees the 15 years of work. Right. And he was really interesting because he started his online work, I think, in high school. And remember, is that what you said? It was something crazy, like it was in high school he started doing like.
You know what? I would have to pull up the show notes to double check.
It was crazy young, and so it's not like, I mean, he's this young guy, but it's not. He's from a YouTuber and internet entrepreneur kind of thing. He's not young. I mean, he's been doing, I think, at least a decade, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, at age 16, computer design.
Yeah.
That would be cool to be a doctor who does code. That was my notes regarding that. So there you go. Yeah, he's quite the phenom online. So
Oh, going back to awareness though, and trying to figure out like, looking around and modeling behavior. Cause then we have Brad Block, right?
right.
The Physician's Guide to Doctoring podcast, who started his podcast because he was learning interesting things that were not about medicine that he thought were really relevant to medicine, all the soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So going out and being curious and pulling it in, we got to get Brad back on because he's a fun guy too. I mean, everybody we've talked to is fun. It's just so
Yeah.
many people.
Yeah. Did we cover most of our podcasters? I mean, that's a pretty impressive though. That just goes to show you how many.
Well,
How
and then
many?
there's the people who have podcasts that you wouldn't necessarily think are podcasts. Like, so Heather Hammerstedt has a podcast. I forgot what his name's, like Curated Health, I think. Anna Quebeca,
Mhm.
she has a podcast. I don't remember what it is, but
And
I
I
know she
think
has one.
does Dr. Eric Tate? I think he has.
He has a
one he
podcast
does.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a crap ton of podcasts now.
Yeah. There's a it's a low cost of entry. If you want to start a podcast, you can. If you feel like there's things you want to share, educate. You think about people out there who don't know what to do and they don't mind talking and, and teaching. It's a good way to kind of play with online things, and you can always decide this isn't for you. But I would say most people, what they get out of this is, for us, I guess the lesson learned from this year is that it's very rewarding. There's a little bit of work that goes in and learning some things, but if you could set aside a couple hours a week, once you get going, it kind of makes it a really unique experience to meet people that you normally wouldn't. It's an easier way to break the ice with people that you want to meet. You can have conversations with them, and even if they're not interested, you just put it out there, and there will be some people that you'll be surprised they are more than happy to chat online, and then you develop a community out of this. And this is why we're very excited and passionate about just doing this podcast and reaching out and interviewing people, because over these interviews there's certain people you connect and want to talk to more, even after that initial interview. So that's a huge plus when it comes to community and not feeling isolated. So I think this is a great way to just kind of try something new and different if you're interested. But there's a lot of things you can do to connect with people in the community. Any
Well,
thoughts on that?
yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can. It's great for connection if you're feeling isolated, and who doesn't ever feel isolated in medicine. If you're feeling like you're sort of the odd duck, maybe you're trying to think of something different and you don't want to just put your nose down and go into the trenches every day and then leave. Like maybe you think, well, there's something wrong here, and everybody's like, oh, I don't care. Just look at the billing and make sure you get your RVUs in. There's an opportunity to do a lot of things. If you're someone who's tired of having your patients come in and saying the same thing over and over again, there's an opportunity now where you can use that as an educational space where you can create either podcasts to answer those questions so that you can have a whole resource for them. You can do a YouTube station the same way. And you touched on the community aspect, is to find other people, because that is a huge part. I mean, there's the feeling like you're so isolated is, again, just is like toxicity to your soul. And it's so nice to see so many people that you can chat with. And no, it's fantastic. I would say, if I had to give any advice, having done a solo as well as a co-hosted podcast, do a co-hosted podcast and make sure it's someone you enjoy talking to, like Melissa, because she's awesome. And
You're
so much
awesome.
fun. Well, I don't know. I just get to participate in the awesomeness, right? So
And accountability. Like there's days that I might not feel like being up and at them, and you're like, let's go. So there's a benefit there too.
there is a benefit there. Yeah. But.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on our lessons learned?
Well, I want to, since we're not having a Friday faves, I do want to put a shout out. I posted this on my personal Facebook because it was so exciting. But we were introduced to this thing called Detroit style pizza by my very, very close friend, Dr. Stacy Leva, and her husband, Michael, who've been raving about this stuff for a long time now. The whole backstory is when I did my fellowship in Michigan. She's from Michigan, and we used to tease each other in our states because I'm a fourth generation native Nevadan, even though I haven't lived there for 4 years. I love my state. It is not Vegas, people. Nevada is not Vegas. That's its own country down there. Nevada is something different. But we used to get in these little things during medical school and residency stuff about Michigan versus Nevada. And then I did fellowship in Michigan, and I had the then I really liked Michigan too. Michigan, so we kind of fell into it. And Zingerman's, which is a real famous delicatessen and kind of whole spawn of businesses in Ann Arbor. We went there a lot, like when they would come out and visit us. So we got these, we started getting the cookbooks, and she actually went with her husband, and he would buy her classes to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So she was taking all this stuff. Anyway, that's a long way to say she had this book from Zingerman's about baking. And one of the recipes in there is this Detroit style pizza. They have been raving about this for like literally 9 months, telling, oh, this is so good. This is so good. This is so good. And we were talking to them about a month ago because some things had happened, and we, just always good to connect with your close friends. And she bought us the book. So she bought us the Zingerman's Guide. It's got the Detroit pizza thing in there. I'm like, all right, well, I got to try this. Holy crap. It's good. Like, I mean, if someone says this, if they're like raving about it, and particularly if it's your close friends and they're raving about it,
Yeah.
I guess this is just a reminder of there's probably a reason they keep saying this every day. Like, this is so good. This is so good. So Detroit style pizza is like my new little fan thing. When I go into it, and then I kind of go overboard and I start looking at all the recipes online. I don't want one recipe. I want 5 recipes. And I bought the pan, like the special little pan for this stuff.
Wow. So
But
you
it is,
made your own. It wasn't
oh yeah,
bought
yeah.
from. Okay.
No, so this is the thing about this. Talk about brainwashing. So much of what we cook and people think is so difficult is not.
Yeah.
So even if you're looking at a pizza, to make the dough seems really, really intimidating. Now, granted, we have a KitchenAid, like the KitchenAid mixer. So that does make it a
That
little bit
helps.
easier.
Yeah.
It's not that much easier, but you don't have
Put
to.
on auto.
You can put it on. Yeah, it just stirs
Just
it.
goes.
But if you literally just look at the recipe, take a couple big breaths, and realize I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of videos now of people are really stuck, and you can cook food as good in your house as you are going to get in most restaurants. I mean, it is
Or better.
or better. And this pizza literally is easy. Like, it takes you want to start probably about 5 hours early, just because you make the dough, and then you have to let the dough rise and all that stuff. But it is awesome. And we've made a lot of pizza. We've made pizza in cast iron pans that have a crispy crust. I have a pizza oven at home. But man, this stuff is like super good.
You say you have a pizza oven at home?
Oh yeah.
What do you mean a pizza oven?
So we have so I have a big green egg, which you can use as a pizza oven, because what you're trying to do is you want to get something really hot, 700-800 degrees for a pizza oven. Then there was it was either a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign on another little one, and I bought that. So it's another pizza oven that is more intentionally designed. I don't use that one as much because it goes through fuel really fast because it gets really hot. But then they have the oven recipes. As I said, there's a cast iron one that you can do, and the pan that's really, really good. Different kind of crust. And then we have this one now where we have the Detroit style, which is another different type of pizza. I guess it sounds like I really am into pizza, but yeah.
Yeah. It's like a pandemic, like a bread pandemic here going on in your house.
Well, that was something that you learned
Spanish, by the way, for
pan, yeah.
pan is bread.
That was something we learned in 2020 is apparently everybody wants to bake bread. Do you remember that it was like in the spring, everybody was baking bread?
Oh yeah. I couldn't find yeast anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually first got a starter, and then we had to stop making bread because we were eating the bread.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. But
well, yeah. I have to add, are you done with your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, but
okay.
How can you top the Detroit style pizza? I mean,
well, I just have to say I use my bread maker.
Oh,
I think it's a Wolfgang Puck. Did I say that right? Yeah, that's I think the guy. Anyway, it's a Wolfgang Puck bread maker, and they have some recipes it comes with. And I wasn't specifically looking to make bread at first, but I was like, I have this half a thing of sour cream. I don't want to just let it go bad. So I'm like, what can I make in my bread maker that requires sour cream? So I just flipped through and I found one, and it was a oh gosh, it's a what kind of bread? I'm trying to think. I'm literally all of a sudden I'm blanking and I'm looking at it. What's the crumbles is like the brown
Coffee cake.
sugar coffee cake. Thank you.
Yeah, shower cake, coffee
It's
cake.
so simple. Um, Thank you. That's why you need a co-host for your, your podcast in case you just go blank. Anyway, so I had never made a coffee cake, and I learned how, like, part way through the cycles, you learn how to like pour this little crumble stuff in the middle, and you throw the batter on top, so you get this cool little
Wave.
swirl of sugar and stuff in there. I've
Yeah.
never done that before. And I was like, God, it's so easy because you just follow the recipe, throw the ingredients in, turn it on, and it's like,
Well, that's super easy. Like a bread machine's the super easy.
super easy. Yeah, and
Um,
it's like there's no excuse not to use it. And
okay,
Corey, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's another super easy way to do it without a bread machine that you should try this as well. It's a no knead loaf. It was published by the New York Times in 2006,
Okay.
and it is insane. Like
The
this one
no
is
need
no
loaf.
knead bread. If you Google it, it will come up.
Okay.
And you put your flour, salt, water, and yeast in a bowl. You mix it, and you let it sit for like 10 hours, and then you have to do. There's a couple little scrapey things. It's super easy. So you have to, obviously, you're planning the day ahead or whatever, but it is super good and super easy. And I was talking about this with my wife, because my wife in the 90s she went up to, I think it was the CIA Culinary Institute, and she took some bread making classes. So she was always making bread. Well, until she met me, and then she was never making bread, and I was always asking her to make me bread. But it was always knead. It was very hard. But holy crap, like this thing came out in 2006 with this no knead, and bread is so easy. It's like nothing to be intimidated of anymore.
So is it because it sits so long that it just creates this like better like dough or something that you're saying?
You're letting the yeast do the work rather than your hands. That's it.
Right. So you're letting it sit longer, so you just have more patience.
Yeah, you just mix it up, and you're just letting the yeast do its whole thing. And no, it's fantastic. And there's also a no knead sourdough that we've made a lot that is a variant of that.
I want to do that. I've never made a sourdough.
I can send you the recipe. It's super easy. You have a starter?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well, you need a sourdough starter. So that's the first thing that you're gonna need to do. That's actually super easy. Everybody you must be the last person, because everybody in the world has a sourdough starter, because everybody was posting their pictures of sourdough bread.
No, I think your Facebook is like finding the people that you're all just talking to each other and don't realize there's a lot of
my echo chamber of bread
sourdough starters.
Anyway. It takes like 5 days. It's not hard. It's super easy. And then here's the danger with the sourdough starter, though. It's like a pet. So because you have to feed this thing every day, and then it poops every day, which is the discard. And then you don't want to get rid of the discard, because it's not really poop. It's actually good stuff. So then you're finding all the recipes to do with your sourdough discard. So it can.
Well, maybe that beast will come later. Maybe I'll just stick with my bread maker, so I don't go crazy on eating too much sourdough.
Yeah, I overwhelmed you. No, this is start here. I'm going to say this is what you do. You start with the no knead bread.
Let's just go there.
Just do that one. See if you like it. Okay. And then you can start the sourdough if you like it. And then you can start a starter. And then it is kind of fun to have a starter, because it's like a pet. You have to name it too. You have to name your starter. Everybody names their starter.
Okay. I have no idea what I would call sourdough starter.
Mine's Augustus. Yeah. That's so, yeah. I have a friend of mine, his starter, him and his wife is called Mr. Cotter.
Oh my God. Obviously, those listening, there are weird little mini cultures and cultures that do some really freaky stuff. That the people on the outside have no idea where the joy is in that.
They're missing the joy, but
yeah. Well, speak of the joy coming up.
The joy coming
up for the podcast.
Joy coming up for the podcast. What do we got is so we actually released an episode today with Dr. Rip Patel, awesome guy, ER doc, who actually his first episode is going to publish in February, but we brought him back. We were going to talk about something completely different, and he just had his COVID vaccine, so we got into
after getting COVID.
Yeah, because he had, so that whole episode is all about COVID. If you want to hear sort of a physician's perspective on it, also the experiences of someone who was infected with COVID and also then got the vaccine, that's a really good episode to listen to. And then we're moving into sort of a new theme for January, where we're going to be talking really about health and wellness, and specifically about nutrition. So we have some really awesome guests. We have Caldwell Esselstyn, who, if you guys don't know him, he has been an advocate for plant-based diets for decades. I think he was a cardiac surgeon.
He was endocrine surgeon.
Endocrine surgeon, you're right.
Yeah.
Endocrine surgeon. And
But it
that's a
showed
recurrent theme.
evidence.
Yeah, and that's a recurrent theme though, is people who are these are surgeons are doing something like what, you know, I think about Ford Brewer, who was like, you know, how do we prevent this stuff, you know, and so he went into, well, what about diet? So he's a pretty hardcore advocate for plant-based diets. We then have Dr. Michael Grieger, who's also a pretty good firm advocate for plant-based diets. He had intention. He was another one because there was a story. I think it was his grandmother was supposed to die.
Yeah.
Did the Pritikin diet in the
Proved him
70s.
wrong.
Yeah, it did the Pritikin diet, which is a plant-based diet, reversed her cardiac disease in the 70s when everybody thought you died. And he's like, I'm going to go to medical school, and he did. And now he does nutritionfacts.org, which is a huge, big thing. And then we have, man, that's all January, because then we got Colin Zhu, who's the chef doc, who's going to talk about plant-based diet and his sort of life story. So interesting. Oh, and here's the other part about that. So one of the things I'm doing for January, part of my goal is January is going to be, this is my announcement to the world, meatless January.
Wow.
So I am not, my wife is already a vegetarian. My daughter's pretty much a vegetarian. My son is like, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, you can join us, or you can cook your own. But I'm going to do no meat in January and see. I still will think I'll eat some meat after that, but I'm going to try to reduce the consumption for a couple of reasons. One, the health, which we know. And the other big one is the environmental effects. Like, we had talked about the documentary, the Richard Attenborough documentary, which was a phenomenal documentary on Netflix, and really talked about climate change and how the world has changed. And I don't care what you think about it. If you think it's man-made or not, the climate's freaking changing, and it's getting worse. So if there's something we can do, we could probably do about it. And one of the things that really hit me was meat consumption. That's something we all do. That's certainly something that we can back off. And it's a win for the environment, and it's a win for your health. So that's my January. So I'll try to keep you informed on how well that's going. But
that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I think it's good. I'm all for it. It's we all need to eat more veggies than we do anyway, so you might as well decrease on some of the meat. You know, not everyone's going to agree. Everyone has their perspective, but the evidence is pretty overwhelming that there's a lot of health to be gained from whole foods and plants, and as long as they're not tarnished with toxins and other things that sometimes get put on those. So those will be conversations for January. The first few weeks, like you said, are a lot of great guests, and even some of our chats about various challenges of change and our take on some of nutrition and fitness things out there. And we'll be transitioning towards the end of that month towards this coaching with another guest, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. So that'll be a nice flow for January, where a lot of people are hoping for change, not only within this pandemic, which is slow coming, but also changes within ourselves and those around us. So make sure to tap into those episodes coming up. Instagram is also where you can find little trailers of those episodes, at least one trailer or a quote to something related to that episode. One thing I want to make sure we mentioned, Kevin, was that we've been doing a lot of Friday faves, but we're going to be transitioning into the Monday motivations, which we'll still chat about our favorite things as well. But for various reasons, we're going to opt for Mondays to release our little special episodes between our main episodes for the podcast, and they'll be caught on Facebook Live and thrown into the mix of the podcast. So you can hear it there as well. Of course, on YouTube is where you can watch the video interviews or conversations. But we'll start that, not the first month. We'll get a little holiday on the 4th. Actually, we'll see. Maybe we'll see how our schedule looks, but we'll definitely be throwing in our Monday motivation starting in January 11th, every Monday. Anything else to add there, Kevin?
No, other than that, I think that's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I'm gonna enjoy doing Monday motivation because it'll allow us a chance to say, what are we gonna focus on this week, right?
right.
And then we can do a review. Like when we start the episode, well, how did your last Monday motivation go? And we can analyze that and then decide what to do next. So it'll be kind of a like little internal goal setting in
Yeah,
practice, and you can all join us. So it'll be kind of fun.
right. And we are human. It's not all about perfection. It's about
How getting better. It's about
progress.
better. That's what it is.
Progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's all about your expectations and but a little accountability, a little guidance, a little inspiration. Hopefully, we can provide a little bit of that. And feel free to chime in or reach out to us at thechangeposition.com if you, or even through the Facebook page, if you have any questions or suggestions for upcoming episodes. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next Facebook Live and or on our episodes. You want to take us out, Kevin?
Sure. So, hey, everybody. This is the Change Position podcast with Dr. Melissa Cada and myself, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we have enjoyed serving you for 2020. We're really excited for 2021. And until next time, stay well, folks.
Happy New Year.